Hey everybody. Just reflecting a little bit on what we have to do next and where we have to go regarding EMS legislation in Kentucky. Update real quick. So, HB 777 went to committee yesterday, was voted favorably, will now proceed on the legislative process. So that part is done in terms of the committee. It still has to go to the floor, the House itself, and then still has to go to the Senate, and there's all kinds of stuff. All that is still out there, but it did go through the committee, so it's officially like kind of out there now. That's not to say that it couldn't have modifications or amendments or something like that along the way, but the basics of it is still pretty much is pretty well set there at this point, most likely. Um, I did want to respond to just some concerns or thoughts that I've kind of heard about this. What does the bill actually do? Because there seems to be some confusion about it. Now we went line by line through it the other day, and I showed you all the part. I maybe skipped over the parts that didn't change, but showed you all the parts of the bill. So I'm not trying to pull anything over your eyes here. What does it do? Number one, it moves K beams to its own agency in the general government cabinet. So right now, K beams sits under KCTCS. This moves it to its own thing in the general government cabinet, like the KBML is, essentially the Board of Medical Licensure. So that's a step forward. That's recognition that this is a profession that is its own thing, and it doesn't need to be under, shouldn't be under something else. So that in and of itself is progress. It does a lot of other things to kind of move, a lot with that move to kind of clarify the way that things would work and that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, what it does is move K beams and EMS regulation into its own organization. So that is actually a pretty significant step forward, and that is something that we've been wanting for some time, and we knew was going to have to happen. And if this passes, then now it happens, and that's good. That's a good thing. The other thing it does is move complaints around a little bit, and it's important to note here. Um, what that bill does is keep complaints against, like, your license as a paramedic or against you as an EMT or anything like that against people, keeps that completely under K beams. Complaints against services, which are significantly less in terms of number, but still there. But complaints against services would still go to K beams. K beams would forward that complaint to the cabinet. The cabinet would do the investigation in the same way as K beams would, with an investigator, just as K beams would, and through a hearing process as K beams would through the same government process. Would ultimately make a finding on it, and then transmit that finding back to K beams for the ultimate disposition, i.e., if there's punishment to be laid out or something like that, then K beams would still do that. It doesn't it doesn't take all complaints and put them under the cabinet. It doesn't give the cabinet like power to do other stuff. And bear in mind, I'm not really defending. Not really defending moving it at all, but if it has to move, and it would have to be palatable to some of the other groups that are interested as part of our compromise with it, this is a relatively small thing to do. And this is a relatively benign way that we still ensure that everybody still has due process, that EMS is taking care of, EMS mostly, and that everybody gets their fair shake. So it's not that, it's not that bad a deal for us all told, especially the way that things could have been if you look at some of the earlier drafts of even this bill, or certainly 296 before that. So this is an improvement. Um, those are the two big things that it does for EMS. Now, it messes with the certificate of need and kind of shifts things around. And if you really care about the certificate of need, if you are a judge executive, that might make a big difference to you. Maybe. Although I suspect if you really look at it and you really think about it, what it kind of does is it says it's a little bit easier to get an ambulance service certificate of need if you are a hospital. Um, but the only time when you would not be required to get a certificate of need would be is if you want to start an ambulance service to move people from your hospital to someplace else, and only from your specific hospital to someplace else. There is some other stuff in there, but again, it's a little bit complex. And honestly, if you're like me, and I count myself more among the EMS providers than I really do administration, because that's where I kind of think my focus is. It's on the care itself. Um, Most of us on this side, and we know this through like just the bit of polling that we've done, most of us don't really have a big stake in the CON stuff. Most of the providers don't really have a big opinion on it. It's there, it's not there, and that's fine. It's kind of outside our job. Again, other people care about it more. I think most of us will find that we can get behind the rest of this bill, and that this won't affect us very much. Again, somebody will argue with that. Okay, here I am. Come, let's have a talk about it. The other thing that it does, and kind of the last thing, the big important things, it makes sure that the board staff, stays with the board and doesn't lose their retirement and still continues to get paid and that kind of stuff. And then it goes into the creation of two different things. One is it requires K-Beams to establish a special committee to look at essentially EMS issues. All basically everything that everyone is concerned about all the time. It says K-Beams has to establish a committee to identify those things and report by December 1st of this year, 2022. So that would seem to be a good thing, especially if you think that more should go on. And I think that more regulation and legislation, or changes, more discussion of regulation and legislation and issues should go on. And so that seems appropriate. The other thing it does is create this legislative task force that goes on for the same time. It would submit its report on December 1st of 2022. This would have, it would be a lot of legislators. There would be some representation from EMS. We are lobbying to get more representation from ground EMS providers, or air EMS providers, field providers, I guess is the way to say that. And make sure that everybody is on there. But this would be in the same way. It would look at what needs there are for legislative changes regarding EMS. And again, these things would be going on at the same time. Hopefully hopefully the K-Beams committee would hopefully finish first, so that you can take that forward and kind of move it, and let the legislative task force know about it. I'm not sure exactly how that would work out, but one would imagine that would be the goal. But it is good in that it says that there are other things that we need to keep working on, and this bill is not the end all of it. It leaves the door open and says we have to do more stuff. That's actually really important, and I know, reading a bunch of the kind of concerns or criticisms of the bill. And first of all, there has to be some compromise, guys. We can't win this. This isn't something that we kind of put out there and said, oh yeah, we're going to go 100% on it. There always has to be compromise on it between the groups, and this is a pretty good compromise that leaves us in favor of leaves us on the better end, realistically, from the way that things could have been. That said, what we have to bear in mind is that this bill does not address every single issue. It cannot address every single issue. And no is really not an EMS bill. It was not written initially by us. We didn't start this. This wasn't that we invited a friend over for coffee and cake and we're going to sit and have a good time and we want this all to happen. This is more like our neighbor tried to break into our house, and the end result is that now we've got our neighbor fixing our stairs. We got to pay him a little bit of money for it, but in the end, this has worked out a lot better for us, and I think we've gotten a lot more out of it from an EMS community than it started off as, but also than we really ever thought that we would. And most of that is thanks to you guys calling and talking to your legislators and making noise about it. So that's great. And again, thank you so much for doing it. Nobody ever thought that we'd be able to oppose this in the way it has. So that's fantastic. I don't want to go on too long about it, but I do want to encourage everybody. It's time to get behind this piece of legislation, behind HB 777. It is reasonable from our side, from the EMS side. It keeps control of EMS with EMS. It does not give it to the cabinet. There's nothing in there that says that the cabinet is going to be able to take over something or anything like that. It keeps EMS regulation with EMS. Um, and by passing this now, even if you don't think it is perfect, it's not designed to be perfect. It's designed to be a compromise. We compromise on this thing so that we can stop answering these questions, because if we don't pass this bill, then next year we're going to be going back and having to answer the exact same thing again. Literally, we will be having the same discussions, and next year, if we have to have these same discussions again, we're probably going to lose. Almost certainly, we're going to lose next year if this comes around again. So this is a good compromise. This is a way to get us to stop answering these kind of the things that we don't want to answer, so that we can move on to the stuff that we do, so that we can talk about training and retention, and how do we get people paid better, and how do we make sure that people are safe, and all the kind of stuff that we want to do. We have to get this out of the way first, and then we can do all that stuff in the coming years, and we'll be in a better position to do it because we were able to show that we can be dealt with, and that we don't just oppose everything that's kind of thrown at us. So I think it's really important that we get as many folks behind HB 777 as possible. So we are lobbying to try to get a little more specific EMS provider representation on the board with 2 more folks. We are lobbying to try to get 2 EMS, not ground providers, field providers on that task force. Feel free, call your legislators, tell them not feel free, but please do call your legislator, call your House member, or email your House member, or email Representative Fleming and say, hey, I'm on the EMS side. We support the bill. We'd like to see a little bit of a change to make sure that EMS providers are appropriately represented on the board and are appropriately represented on that task force. But overall, we think this is a reasonable compromise. If we don't show that we can be part of that reasonable compromise, then it won't matter how many people we want to say that we have on the board, because we're not going to get the option. We're not going to be asked. It's going to come down to that. So, again, thank you very much. Continue calling your House member, call your legislator. Eventually, we're going to have to look at the other House of the Senate. But for right now, the way things stand today, call your folks. Please tell them that you support this bill. We'd like to see a little bit of an amendment, and that language is. I sent that language to Representative Fleming about what we'd like to see. Hopefully, we can get it just a little bit more tweaked. But folks, I do want to tell you, I think from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. We've worked hard to protect ourselves, and this will protect us. It may not give us everything we want right now, but we'll get to it. We'll get it. So, again, thank you, and we'll see y'all later. Stay safe.